Hello there, and welcome back to Bloodborne. Last time we had trekked through Old Yharnam, killed the vicious blood-starved beast, and had obtained a chalice at the request of Gammon. And now, before we head back to the dream, let's check out these statues in this chapel area here. They're fairly interesting to look at. Gammon is back, but we're not going to talk to him just yet. The information he has now is not going to be relevant for what we're doing in this episode. Instead, we're going to upgrade the rifle spear. I did promise last episode that we would be using it in this one, and it's a pretty neat weapon all things considered. It's also important to remember to equip your best gems to the weapon that you plan on using. Every increase the damage you can get is helpful. A trick weapon crafted by the workshop heretics, the powder kegs. As noted later in the description, this weapon also boasts a firearm, making it a fairly unique weapon even among Bloodborne's transforming weapons. Additionally, we'll be finally getting rid of Gascoigne's gear. It's served us well, but let's switch to something a bit more stylish. Some nice charred hunter armor, along with a fancy top hat. Now, we have a fair amount of blood echoes remaining, so let's go give them to the doll here and get some levels.
Welcome home, good hunter. What is it you desire? Very well. Let the echoes become your strength. Let me stand close. Now shut your eyes.
We have plenty of health, so let's put some points into skill instead of vitality, and get a bit of extra damage from the rifle spear's skill scaling.
Farewell, good hunter. May you find your worth in the waking world.
Now, let's check out that chalice that we obtained from the blood-starved beast. It is a Pthumerian chalice, used in ritual at the tomb altar in the hunter's dream to break the seal of the old underground labyrinth, and let ye partake in communion. As Gammon mentioned, chalices allow one to take holy communion with the gods, and it is at these ritual altars that it is done. By placing a chalice on the ritual altar and offering the required items, as well as a few blood echoes, you can create a chalice dungeon. Chalice dungeons are optional areas that you do not need to complete in order to beat the game, but are there to allow for additional and unique content. The uniqueness being largely in the form of distinct enemies that are not found anywhere else in the game. There's also a fair bit of loot in the dungeons, mostly consumables that you could just purchase from the hunter's dream, but there are a few items worth getting. The chalice dungeons are a fairly divisive feature in this game, the reasons for which I'll be going over as we go through them. A second lantern so soon may seem a bit of an odd choice, but that is due to how the chalice dungeons are structured. Each dungeon is made up of a number of layers, which could also be thought of as floors. These layers are, for the most part, distinct separated areas that you must progress through sequentially. And at the start of each layer is a lantern. There was also a lantern at the start of every chalice dungeon, which is how you warp into them. And that's why there were those 2 lanterns so soon after the other. This place is pretty dank and dingy, but what else do you expect of a tomb, even if it is the tomb of a god? And right here we have the main progression stopper, a locked door. We can kill vicious beasts, but we can't force open a simple metal grate. To progress through each layer, you need to find the switch to unlock the door, which will allow you to progress onto the next layer. A simple and focused method of progression, which may or may not appeal to you depending on your tastes in level design. At the very least, it is at odds with the typical level design in From Software's third-person action RPGs. Up there, I try to get the attention of that Molotov-throwing asshole. Sometimes you can get him to come down and then take him out quickly, but it fails to work, so I just go ahead. We're out of range from him over here. These here are the Labyrinth Watchers. They are the basic enemy type in the Chalice dungeons, equivalent to the Yharnam Hunters in Central Yharnam. They're not terribly threatening if you can divide and conquer, but if you let them gang up on you, they can take you down very quick, as they have some very quick attacks and can deal surprisingly high damage for their small stature. And yeah, as you can see, the firebomb throwing one likes to drop down. The rifle spear has been a pretty effective weapon so far, but there you can see one of its greatest weaknesses. As a weapon with primarily poking attacks, it is very easy to miss an enemy if you're close and in just the right position. Up here we have another major element of the Chalice dungeons, and that is traps, like these swinging axes here. Keeping an eye out for your surroundings is as important as ever. Here we see where a spear can come in handy in a narrow area like this. Good for bottlenecking enemies in a doorway. And here we have a second major feature of the Chalice dungeons, a unique enemy that is found in nearly every dungeon, in nearly every layer, and that is a Bell Maiden. I ganked her pretty quick, and that is because she is potentially the most threatening enemy in any dungeon, even more so than the bosses. And that is because, as you may have noticed, she was summoning enemies. Specifically Labyrinth Watchers with a sort of red misty aura around them. She can summon an infinite number of those, although she's capped to around 6 out at a single time. And they will seek you out no matter where you are on the layer, once you've attracted her attention. So she should be your priority target once you've found her. Up here we have the switch to the locked door that we found earlier, and it is guarded by a mini-boss of sorts. This here is the Merciless Watcher. They come in several varieties, and this one wields a lantern and a large club. Their attacks are damaging, but slow and predictable, and so the best solution is to simply stagger and go for a visceral attack. And that'll get rid of them in short order. And these enemies here are why you want to lead that watcher away down the stairs. Trying to stagger him while being pelted with poison knives is not a pleasant experience. If you're decent with unlocked throwing, you can potentially take them out at a distance with Molotovs. But in general, it's just best to lead the Watcher away and then take them out. Once you've cleared out the enemies, you're free to hit the switch. It says that a door opened somewhere, but the door to the next layer is always near the entrance to the layer. So I'm not entirely sure why that is worded that specific way. Now we could head back across this bridge, but there's another area down here. It's not just instant death if you fall off the bridge. Here we have a veritable horde of rats. That is why I've switched to the transform state of the weapon. The untransformed state acts how you'd expect a spear to act, featuring all poking attacks, but the transform state acts more like a halberd, or other type of polearm weapon featuring shorter ranged slashing attacks. It loses a bit in outward reach, but is a bit better for dealing with groups of enemies. Like so. A little congratulatory gesture, since this room is probably the toughest room on this layer, even more so than the switch room with its mini-boss. And in return we get some consumables. As I mentioned before, the vast majority of the items that you'll find in the Chalice dungeons are simple consumables that you simply could have purchased elsewhere. If, however, you manage to go through the dungeons without using items, like blood vials and quicksilver bullets, you will come out at a profit, however small. And right there we have a bit of a sneaky enemy. They walk around all quiet-like until you get near them, and then they become aggressive as all hell. Their attacks are very dangerous, and many of them are surprisingly quick. So let's deal with this guy the easy way with the Rifle Spear's strongest feature, that transformed charge attack. Every move of every weapon in the game has its own modifier that multiplies the attack rating of a weapon, the attack rating of a weapon being its base damage plus the bonus damage from stat scaling. A weapon's highest modifier is typically its transformed charging attack. Usually this is around 2 times, but in the case of the Rifle Spear, its transformed charging attack has a multiplier of 2.9 times. This makes its charging attack one of the strongest attacks in the game. That, plus it being a charging attack that can be done from far away, makes it by far the weapon's strongest asset. Now, after opening that locked door, but before progressing to the next layer, you have to fight a boss. Say hello to the Undead Giant. This mean motherfucker will attempt to get you right from the start, so you want to watch out for that. Most of his attacks are melee strikes with those scythes strapped to his arms, and they give him quite a bit of reach, which can make dodging attacks tricky. You'll generally have an easier time dodging his attacks if you stay to his side or at his back, but he does have a number of strikes specifically aimed there, so you'll want to watch out for those so you can avoid them. You can also just stay out of range of his attacks, wait for them to end, and then go into strike while he's in his recovery phase, but if you misjudge the number of attacks he's gonna do, you end up eating quite a bit of damage. You also notice that we're not doing all that much damage. He's a fairly tanky fellow, but if you aim your attacks just right, you can deal quite a blow. By popping that pustule on his left leg, he takes around 1/3 of his HP total in damage, making the fight go much quicker than it otherwise would. You don't want to get too spammy with your attacks because he has 2 attacks of his own specifically designed to counter that. That spin and that shockwave generating slam. The spin hits 360 degrees around him, so the only way you're going to avoid that is if you're out of his range. And the shockwave hits to the side and to the front, so you can avoid it if you're directly behind him or out of range. Something else you might have noticed is that his melee combos have been getting longer as the fight's gone on. The lower his HP, the longer his melee combo is, making it trickier to dodge. If you get in enough hits at the right time, however, you can stagger him, just like you would any boss. The visceral attack ends up failing as it comes too late, but the regular strike done in its stead ends up staggering him a second time, allowing for a successful visceral attack. And then all it takes is a transformed charged R2 to finish him off. And that's the Undead Giant. He can kill you quick, but he's not too tricky to handle. Killing bosses in Chalice dungeons gets you 3 things. A potentially unique item, which will cover the next boss we kill. Upgrade materials appropriate for the level of the Chalice that you're in. Early Chalice is giving basic bloodstone shards. And a random blood gem. The blood gems that you get from Chalice dungeon bosses tend to provide pretty high bonuses for the point that you get them. And now it's on to the second layer. Again, every layer has a lantern at the start, allowing you to easily warp in and out should you feel the need. But we have a pretty good number of blood vials, so I don't think that's necessary. Remember how I said that traps were a major element in the Chalice dungeons? There's another common one, a floor tile that triggers various kinds of traps. That one spawned in a number of red enemies, red Labyrinth watchers, who are stronger than normal, but they're easily enough taken out, if you're careful. Here we have a type of Labyrinth watcher that's especially of note, these ones that wield these fire hatchets. This is due to a specific drop that they have that we'll be seeing from one we'll kill later. These poison knife throwing watchers are easily one of my least favorite enemies in the Chalice dungeons. If they're by themselves, they're not threatening, but annoying, and if they're with a bigger enemy, they can be quite a threat, stunning you at just the wrong moment. Another common trap is these wooden coffins with enemies that will burst out when you walk by them. Rare enough that you shouldn't destroy every coffin you come across unless you really have a lot of time on your hands, but common enough that you still have to watch out for it. And not necessarily a trap per se, but there are these smoke-generating goblets that will obscure portions of rooms and potentially hide enemies. It's generally a good idea to break them to prevent that from happening. Multiple paths, which to choose? This one just has an enemy. Let's go take care of it real quick. Oh, hey! That is another common trap. You'll walk down a hallway to go after an enemy, and then enemies will spawn behind you to surprise you and likely kill you if you're not expecting it. And there we see another failing of the rifle spear. Even its non-pokey attacks don't exactly have the best hitboxes, and missing that enemy ended up costing us our life. Thankfully it's not too far into the lair, and it won't take much work to get back there. If you notice, as long as you don't stray too close to those coffins, the enemies won't burst out. Another method of dealing with them. So this time we know what's coming. The enemy ahead has our souls. Let's try and take him out quickly. This makes dealing with the resulting enemy spawn much less tricky. Enemies will also like to hide in corners, especially in hallways like this, so you should always keep your eyes peeled. And here we see possibly the most devious type of trap. A trap that is not triggered by an obvious tile, but by simply stepping on a certain section of the floor. These will always end up summoning a group of these red enemies, and it's very easy to die to them. Yeah, despite being the basic enemy type, the Labyrinth Watchers are honestly one of the more dangerous enemy types in the Chalice dungeons, really in the game. They have a number of surprisingly quick attacks, they do a lot of damage, especially if they're their red variant, and a number of their attacks stun for a rather long period of time for this game. Typically only heavier attacks from bosses stun as long as theirs do, and if you're facing a crowd of them, that can easily lead to you getting stun locked and dying without being able to dodge out just from getting hit once. Here we have a dead end, not with a switch, but with a treasure chest. It too has a mini-boss guarding it. Well, a mini-boss of sorts. So surely there must be something grand in the treasure chest. And grand it is, necessary too if we want to continue doing Chalice dungeons. We used Ritual Blood Tier 1 in addition to some Blood Echoes in order to make this Chalice dungeon from the Chalice. To make higher tier Chalice dungeons, we will need higher tier Ritual Blood, such as that Ritual Blood 2. And so it is an important item for progression through the Chalice dungeons. Red enemies that disappear when we kill them. I know what that means. That means that there's a Bell Maiden nearby, and once you realize that, you need to find and kill him immediately, or you will be swarmed by the minions that she summons. Oftentimes while fighting regularly placed enemies, and that generally doesn't go too well. But Bell Maidens are not all doom and gloom, they're generally a sign that you're near the switch. Something further confirmed by that figure in the distance. Yeah, him over there. That rather large personage is the mini-boss guarding the switch for this level. He looks kind of like the Merciless Watcher from before, but he's less clothed. He's also considerably more agile. A lot of PvP nuts, myself included, think this enemy type might be a reference to and joke about PvPers from Dark Souls 1, who tended to go around naked, flipping around with giant weapons, at least at higher levels. This one went down fairly easily, but be assured that this enemy type is very dangerous, especially when you start getting into the later, tougher chalices where they have a lot more damage and HP. Also, thank you FromSoft for lovingly rendering their taints. By the way, remember how I said that the flame hatchet wielding Labyrinth Watchers had a special drop? That's it. They drop a special type of blood gem known as an elemental gem, in this case a fire one. These gems typically only show up in the Chalice dungeons, rarely appearing in the main game, as it were. They also have a special property when equipped to most weapons, which I'll be going over in a later video. Also of note is the fact that that gem had the Cursed modifier, which means it comes with a negative effect in exchange for increasing the positive effects far beyond what you would normally find in a gem of its level. And right here we have the layer looping back on itself, taking us back to the start with these two hatchet-wielding enemies and the poisoned knife-throwing asshole. And so, it's time for boss number 2. A common type of boss found in the Chalice dungeons is one that repurposes regular enemies, typically mini-boss ones, in an arena like this. In this case, 2 Merciless Watchers and a slightly upgraded variant called the Watcher Chieftain. He's the one wielding that lantern and big club there. He has a bit more HP than the other 2. You'll notice the one that's standing at the back has a gun. You'll typically want to try and keep a bit of masonry between you to prevent from being shot while you're fighting the other 2. In general, the best way to tackle these guys is the same as if they were alone, going for stagger shots and resulting visceral attacks. Though they may be a boss, they don't have much more HP than their regular variants. As you can see there, the one with the gun can stun you at the most inopportune of times if you don't keep some object in between you and him. With the 2 melee attackers taken out, the remaining Merciless Watcher is complete cake. He will continue to try and shoot you with his gun, even though it will completely miss you if you're close to him. If you're close to him, he will respond by whacking you with his lantern most of the time, but it does so little damage that you don't even need to try and avoid it. And when he's at low HP, he'll take out his club, allowing you to stagger and get a visceral attack, just like so. Not a tricky boss by any means. And as I mentioned before, for some bosses you'll get a unique reward, typically a chalice. In this case we get a root chalice. Standard chalices, such as the one we got from the Bloodstar Beast, will generate a fixed dungeon. These can be considered progression chalices, as beating one will allow you to unlock the next, and each one will typically have some unique content. Root chalices, on the other hand, are randomized versions of the chalices that you find them in. So the root chalice we obtained here will generate a dungeon like this one, but with a different layout and different bosses from a specific pool of available bosses. Typically, root chalices aren't terribly worth doing, as you don't unlock any new unique content for doing them, and the rewards you get tend not to be terribly worthwhile. At any rate, here we have the 3rd and final, for this dungeon, layer. No, I'm gonna get you. Ah, no. Enemies like you are invincible when at the top portion of the ladder climb, unfortunately. Here we have one of the more interesting room types in the entirety of the Chalice dungeons. It is a very large room filled with a large variety of enemies, such as that never before seen fireball shooting centipede thing. I'm really not sure how else to describe it. We also have a Watcher manning a cannon from up above, but he's a pretty terrible aim. He's not worth worrying about. Wandering Nightmares are very worth targeting when you find them in Chalice dungeons, as they do not drop upgrade materials like the ones found in the main game, and instead drop blood gems, typically good ones. These enemies here are a sign that there's a Bell Maiden somewhere. You can also hear her in the distance if you pay attention. But we gotta finish off this guy first. If you can manage to strike his upper body, he'll take massively more damage. But either way, he goes down fairly quickly as long as you're aggressive. Alright, let's go find that Bell Maiden. Again, the transformed charged attack of the rifle spear can be extremely useful in the right circumstances. Bell Maiden, where are you? I can hear her nearby. She's somewhere close. Aha, there we go. You can see where they're coming from. Aha! At last we meet. For the first time. For the last time. Yeah, remember how I said that they could stun for an unreasonably long time, leading you to getting stun locked? There's a minor example of that. Since it was only 2 hits, it wasn't enough to kill us, but if there were more enemies around, it would have been goodbye Lillian. But with her taken out, this area is suddenly much more peaceful. We can use the cannon ourselves, but it's not terribly useful. If you're locked onto an enemy while firing it, you will aim at them, but this situation rarely comes up. And here we have a fairly interesting enemy, the Pilgrim. This long-legged glowing fellow is fairly non-aggressive, so let's leave them alone. I'm sure that won't come back to haunt us. And here we have another switch guarded by a new variant of the Merciless Watcher. These ones wield fiery clubs, and they have a very quick initial attack. To stagger them out of it, you really need to know the attack is coming and to fire in advance. But if you do, it's not terribly tricky. And that's it for this layer. Now all we have to do is find our way back to the entrance and fight the boss. But before we do, let's check out this over here. One more trap. It's there to catch you should you try to sneak around the side to get to the switch. And had that hit us, it almost certainly would have one-shot us. Those dot traps do unreasonably high damage. so there's something else you want to keep an eye out for. Although all we have left that we have to do is beat the boss, there's still a bit more of this layer to explore. And in general, it's worth exploring every nook and cranny of each layer to find all the items that you can. Doom mold, however, is not terribly useful to us as it's used in the generation of root chalices, which we're not going to be doing. One last trap to leave us off, and a nearly deadly one. As I said, even though these are the most common enemy type, they are far and away one of the most dangerous. And here we are, back in the big room. But before we head back to the start, let's backtrack a bit as there was one more pathway we hadn't quite explored. An item at the end of the hallway. Surely this isn't going to be a trap. I guess the game's feeling generous towards us at this moment. I'll take it. But now we have to find our way back to the lower level of this area. Don't want to just fall, that could be very damaging, potentially. And here it is, an elevator between the two levels. If you have especially good eyesight and memory, you may remember seeing us pass by the other side of this lift. Past the switch that would have called it when we were exploring the ground floor earlier. As it turns out, had we simply gone the other way when exploring after fighting the centipede, we would have found the stairs much quicker. But it is what it is. Before we take on the boss, however, let's return to the dream and restock on supplies and spend our blood echoes. Oh ho, it appears the doll has gone missing. Gammon's still here though, and we're still going to ignore him. We get quite a few high quality blood gems, so let's slot them into the rifle spear. They are a pretty considerable upgrade over our current blood gems. You may have noticed that the rifle spear has blood attack as well as physical. That does not apply to the melee strikes and only counts for the damage of the gun portion. Oh, there you are. What you doing over here?
Welcome home, good hunter. What is it you desire? Over time, countless hunters have visited this dream. The graves here stand in their memory. It all seems so long ago now. Very well. Let the echoes become your strength. Let me stand close. Now shut your eyes.
Let's get some more skill. More damage with the rifle spear is always nice.
Farewell, good hunter. May you find your worth in the waking world.
Alright, let's return to Layer 3 and kill the boss. You know how I said we were going to kill the boss? Well, we will, but not just yet. Sometimes between layers, or between a layer's locked gate and its boss, you'll find these little side paths that lead to optional areas in the Chalice dungeons. You don't need to do these to progress through the dungeons, but they are typically worth doing, as they contain ritual items needed to make Chalice dungeons. And sometimes it is necessary to do them if you want all of the items needed to make the next Chalice in the line. And there we get a rare drop from him, Bolt Paper, the electrifying cousin of the Fire Paper. Invented by Archibald, the infamous eccentric of the Healing Church workshop. I had intended to show off its use here before remembering that, oh yeah, you can't apply elemental buffs to the rifle spear, which is unfortunate. And that guy is certainly doing something over there. I guess he's not sure if he should come and attack us or not. Let's make that choice for him, shall we? Something that you may have noticed by now is that the layers have reused a lot of the same rooms. I mentioned before that the Chalice dungeons are fairly divisive as to whether people like them or not, and that's one of the major reasons. The Chalice dungeons don't have all that much unique content, considering how many of them that there are. For example, they tend to reuse a lot of the same rooms over and over. And depending on your mindset, you can either be okay with it like I mostly am, or you may hate it and thus hate the dungeons and never do them beyond the first one or two. Here we have a new chest that is considerably more ornate than any of the previous ones we have seen. Typically at the end of these optional areas you'll see a big chest, such as this. And it will typically contain a large amount of the next kind of ritual blood you need to make the next chalice. As a general rule, if you explore a chalice dungeon fully, you'll have all the materials you need to make the next one in line, when that time comes. But if you choose not to do one of these optional paths, that may not be the case. So if you want to do them all, you should explore them fully. And here we have another one of these dot traps that can be avoided if you're careful. You can also break them, and then you can just step on the triggering tiles all day and be perfectly fine. Well, that seems to be it for this optional area, so let's head back and encounter the boss. A descending stairway followed by a larger than average door. You know that the boss means business when that is the case. Say hello to the Watchdog of the Old Lords. He likes to open up with a charging attack, so dodge to the side. That one hurts quite a bit if it hits you. As you might expect of a dog-like creature, most of his attacks are done with his toothy maw. With careful timing, you can dodge between them and get in quick hits to his legs. Occasionally, he'll stop to vomit a bit of lava, leaving you free to attack. If you attack his legs enough, you can make him collapse for a bit, giving you more time to do attacks. But he will recover from it with an AoE, so keep your distance towards the end of it. While his regular bite attacks can easily be dodged through, this one can't. This one you just want to back off and wait for him to finish. With the rifle spear you can capitalize on his recovery period due to its long distance charge attack. Again, don't stick around for too long after knocking him down. While dodging in between his bites can be effective for getting in a lot of hits, if you mess up your timing, you're gonna eat a lot of damage. But as long as you stay at full HP during this fight, none of his attacks should one-shot you, assuming a decent amount of vitality. When you reduce his health to around a third of its total, he'll gain a few new attacks. One is this AoE, which you just need to back off to avoid. Another is a quicker version of his charge attack that can easily catch you unaware, if you're not expecting it. If you attack his head at just the right time, you'll make him collapse. You can't get a visceral attack, but his head will take much more damage during that short period, allowing you to make very quick work of him. And that's the Watchdog of the Old Lords. A pretty fun, but not too tough boss fight. There are a few elements to the fight that I did not get a chance to show off, but I'll have opportunities in the future to do that. For beating him here, we get the Central Pthumerian chalice, which is the next chalice in the Pthumerian line. And we'll be exploring that sometime later. But for now, that's it. So, thanks for watching, and see you next time.